Well, good morning in the UK, good afternoon in Kazakhstan. We are here to talk about green finance in Nur-Sultan and the work of the Astana International Financial Center in green finance. Just by way of introduction, first of all, a thank you to our sponsors who are making possible the series of events that we run thinking about finance, and this occasion on green finance. They are really very helpful to us and allow us to do a wide range of events involving some really interesting people. Talking about interesting people, we have three really distinguished people to talk to you today. Professor Dr. Alexander van der Putte, Chief Strategy Officer of the Astana International Financial Center, Azel Nurkmetova, CEO of the AIFC Finance Center Limited, and Professor Michael Manelli, our Executive Chairman, and someone who's been thinking about green finance and sustainability for many, many years. And we'll come on to their presentations in a minute. I just want to mention that there'll be space for questions at the end of the session. And on the screen, you have a dashboard which has a question box that enables you to type questions in and send them to us. And at the end of the presentations, we'll pick up as many of those questions as we can and share them between the panelists. And really looking forward to your engagement this morning and this afternoon. So without spending any more time listening from me, Mike Wardle, I'm going to move on and hear from our panelists.
Thank you, Mike. And please, next slide, please. So today, my colleague and I, we will be talking about AIFC Green Finance Center, and with a particular focus on the changing financing paradigm. My colleague is Azel Nurkmetova. She has been with us since the very beginning, and more recently, we have created a separate entity, a subsidiary of the AIFC authority, which is the Green Finance Center, where she is currently the chief executive. The fact that we created a separate entity further emphasizes the importance we put on green and sustainable finance. So today, what I would like to do is we would like to focus on three areas. First of all is the higher level picture of the Astana International Financial Center, and that's the vision, the mission, and also our strategic directions. Then Azel will take over, and she will look and zoom in more specifically into the history, milestones, and partnership of the AIFC Green Finance Center. And then finally, Azel and myself, we will look at the journey ahead. I need to emphasize that we have changed our name, not as the AIFC, but as the capital where we are located. It used to be called Astana, hence our name, Astana International Financial Center. Since about a year, it's called Nur-Sultan. So please keep in mind that our name has changed. Nur-Sultan is the capital of the Republic of Kazakhstan. So next slide, please, Mike. Thank you. On this slide, I would like to talk at the high level again about both our vision and our mission. Well, when I teach strategy, I always say a vision should be clear enough to give direction, yet vague enough to allow initiative. So what is our vision? Our vision is to become the leading international financial center in the region. And the region we see actually as very broad. It's not just Kazakhstan or Central Asia. It also includes the Caucasus, Western China, Mongolia, and also Eastern Europe. On the other hand, our mission is, and I would define it as the reason why we exist. And here, we already emphasize the importance of sustainability and being green over time. So our mission is to contribute to the sustainable economic development of the region. And we want to do this by fostering innovative financial products and services. One example of innovative financial products and services that Azel will talk about is, for example, a green bond. On the next slide, our ecosystem. Like with many hubs around the world, we have created and we're still actually fine-tuning it, a dynamic ecosystem. And that dynamic ecosystem has two overlapping sub-ecosystems. On the right-hand side, on your slide, we see financial sector players. These are typically large but traditional financial sector participants. They include brokerage firms, investment banks, asset managers, venture capital firms, established players. Now, on the left-hand side, we have AIFC FinTech. And we have, in AIFC FinTech, a number of startups, tech entrepreneurs, and other companies that eventually may become large financial sector players. How do they finance? Well, they finance through venture capital, but they're also financed by participants in sub-ecosystem 1. Now, the overlapping part is what makes it really dynamic. And what we have in here is, first of all, a number of professional service providers. That includes law firms, audit and tax firms, but also consultants. And of course, equally important is the venture capitalist firms that I have already referred to previously. But not to forget, we also need to prepare talented people with the competencies that are going to be needed to compete in the future. And especially in the context of the fourth industrial revolution. So we created a Bureau of Continuous Professional Development that has so far trained 2,000 people in a variety of disciplines, including, of course, green finance, but also in tech-related areas. On the next slide, and this is the final slide that I will be using, is where do we want to channel the investment in order to remain true to our mission? Remember, our mission is to contribute to the sustainable economic development of Kazakhstan and the region. So we see three big areas. First of all is scale the circular economy. Number two is invest in physical, but equally important, digital infrastructure. And finally is to make this all work in order to leapfrog into the future and leveraging fourth industrial revolution concepts and ideas and apply them to different sectors, whether that's oil and gas, mining, transport and logistics, smart cities, but also, for example, agriculture, where there's enormous potential in order to make that, to scale that, but also make that substantially more sustainable over time. What you also see here is that we looked at the potential in terms of being sustainable, how big the economic multiplier is, how scalable these are, and whether it stimulates entrepreneurship. And when considering, for example, entrepreneurship, this is very important for us because if we look at Kazakhstan, 28% of the economy is driven by small and medium-sized enterprises. In OECD countries, this is actually about 65%. So we need to stimulate entrepreneurship through these sustainable projects that are scalable and have a significant economic multiplier. Now, my colleague on the next slide will then talk about specific aspects related to the Global Green Finance Center, not the global, the Green Finance Center, sorry about that, and more specifically about history milestones and partnership. Asel?
Thank you. Thank you, Alexander. And I would like to thank organizers again for this opportunity to present the AIFC Green Finance Center and Green Finance in Kazakhstan. Can we go to the next slide, please? And as Alexander mentioned, just to be in one line of vision and mission, we have a bit different, but this difference only in the word is green. So our vision is to become a green finance hub for the region, for the same region that Alexander mentioned. And I'm happy to say that we work with the Central Asian countries already. And our mission to provide a knowledge platform and expertise in green finance and to scale up green finance instruments, products, and services. Can we go to the next slide, please? And here I would like to tell you about the history and the milestones in green finance development in Kazakhstan through AIFC. So back in 2016, it was the meeting of Foreign Investors Council chaired by our president, and investors. It was an investors' initiative to actually develop green finance, to start developing green finance on AIFC platform. And that year, we also signed the two significant MOUs with EBRD and with UNDP on development of green finance in Kazakhstan. And as a result of the MOU with EBRD, in 2017, we had a concept of creation of green finance system in Kazakhstan. And the main idea, one of the key outcomes of this concept was the development of green bond market, and I will tell about this later. Based on that concept, we've also developed a strategy on AIFC regional leadership in green finance until the year 2025. And in this strategy, we pointed out four main directions. The first is to attract green projects and to create kind of pipeline of green projects in Central Asia, and to enjoy the ecosystem of AIFC. So to get these projects domiciled in AIFC, as Alexander mentioned before. The second strategic goal is to create a green bond market. The third goal is to build the capacity to create expertise, as I said. And the fourth goal is to raise awareness among the stakeholders, among population and the government and national companies and SMEs and everyone who is not familiar with green finance. In fall 2017, we also signed a memorandum of understanding with the Casablanca Finance City, and at the same time in Casablanca, we also were among the founding members of Financial Centers for Sustainability, which is an international network of financial centers who adhere to development of green finance. So the next year, in 2018, we developed the AX Green Bond rules. They are based on climate bonds standards and ICMA Green Bond principles. And these rules are unique on CIS region. We also, in June 2018, we created a Green Finance Center as a structural division within AIFC authority to start developing another documents, kind of regulation, and the start of institutionalizing green finance on AIFC. We also created an advisory council on green finance chaired by our governor, and among the members of this council are representatives of EBRD, Climate Bonds Initiative, Tsinghua University, businesses, and the Central Bank of England also. Also that year, we, in terms of raising awareness about the green finance, we decided to start the annual Green Growth Forum. And that year, we gathered more than 300 experts from different parts of the world and from the local stakeholders. And we also participated in IOSCO World Investors Week to show that green finance is not only developing in the capital of Kazakhstan, but also in the regions of Kazakhstan. Last year, in 2019, we continued to develop the kind of regulatory base for developing green finance. So we hold the first seminar on developing the taxonomy, which is a classifier of green projects. And here I need to say that different countries has its own taxonomy. For example, we know about European Union taxonomy, about Chinese taxonomy for different financial instruments, the Mongolian taxonomy, for example. And all these taxonomies, they have their own vision, taking into account the development of country's economy. So they include the projects that are more likely to be developed and implemented in this particular country. We also held the training together with the Climate Bonds Initiative. This was an executive training for the top management of local stakeholders, including brokers, including consulting firms, those who provide external reviews for green bonds, and including the management of national companies. So the potential issuers, the market players, the potential investors. Also that year, our exchange, Astana International Exchange, became a signee of Belt and Road Initiative's Green Investment Principles, which is a big step forward and towards the development of green finance. We also took part in drafting the legislation on a national level. So we participated in drafting the new environmental code of Kazakhstan by including the definitions of green finance, including the definitions of green financial instruments such as bonds, loans, and the taxonomy itself. And in the future, it will give us opportunity to introduce incentives for these particular instruments. We also continued the arrangement of Green Growth Forum together with the other knowledge platforms such as Green Finance Leadership Program and IOSCO World Week. And this year, in 2020, the first significant step was the separation of the Green Finance Center from the AIFC authority. So we became a separate legal entity, also a participant of AIFC. It was done for the boosting the market from inside, so to say. And I will tell more about the services that we provide as a center later. We also held the Green Taxonomy Roundtable. So we developed it last year, and we held the negotiations with all the stakeholders, all the interested parties regarding the green taxonomy. So we have this approved, and hopefully this year we will approve it, and it will be the annex to our existing green bond rules. So all potential issuers, all issuers and investors will use the taxonomy as a guideline for issuing green bonds. And now under development, there are several documents. And we're working on the AIFC Statement of Commitment to Sustainable Finance Principles, the Exchange Voluntary ESG Disclosure, and we're also working on one additional instrument, which is social bonds, having in mind this the current crisis, the current situation with the socioeconomic crisis. So can we go to the next slide, please? As I mentioned, the AIFC Green Finance Center provides services as a separate organization. So we provide consulting. We actually provide consulting support, which is absolutely for free for our stakeholders, so including investors and market players. As I said before, not all investors and brokers and underwriters know much about green finance. So we also work with them in this direction. We also provide support, the significant support to our potential issuers of green bonds, including financial incentives. So we cover expenses incurred in obtaining the external review, which is a mandatory document, listing document for our exchange. We also can prepare the green bond framework, and we do help our national companies and some SMEs to prepare internal documents, including green bond framework. And we can also do external review and prepare other listing documents that issuer need to have. So we also conduct the research in green finance and build capacity by organizing annual Green Growth Forum, conducting seminars, trainings, and presentations for our stakeholders. And even though we are a separate legal entity, kind of commercial organization, but we still operate as a development institution. And in future, there are also in plans the monitoring, reporting, and verification internal policies. Can I go to the next slide, please? Yes, here you can see the map of our partners, and I'm happy to say that almost all the world is covered with our partnerships. So we work closely with multi-development banks, EBRD, ADB, World Bank Group, Eurasian Development Bank. We also work with UN agencies and development institutions. We work with knowledge platforms such as Tsinghua University and Green Growth Knowledge Partnership. With the financial centers, FC4S, as I mentioned before, the Casablanca Finance City, and we also work with our local Association of Environmental Organizations of Kazakhstan, which unites the majority of stakeholders in green finance and in green economy. Can you go to the next slide, please? I think this is it for my part. And now I will give the floor to Alexander again.
So on the next slide, I want to present a case study. We're currently looking and talking to a number of existing investors in Kazakhstan. Who are these existing investors? They are typically foreign companies that are active in oil and gas and in mining. And as part of their corporate social responsibility, but also because of the real potential that exists in Kazakhstan, some of them are interested in, for example, a solar farm or a wind farm. So here I want to illustrate how working through the AIFC platform, we could not eliminate, but we could dramatically help manage risk for foreign investors. So let's assume that this is a solar farm, an investment of 100 million pounds. The first thing we could do, we could structure this as a special purpose vehicle. Our regulator, AFSA, is able to structure a project like this as an SPV. That's the first thing we can do. The second thing is we can help lower the cost of capital. Instead of 100% financing through equity, we can issue, for example, a green bond. Of course, this is where the Global Green Finance Center gets involved. But also, as Asel mentioned, we have a green bond taxonomy on the AIX, the Astana International Exchange. And the Astana International Exchange, for your information, is a joint venture between primarily the Shanghai Stock Exchange, but also the Nasdaq. And we're actually using the Nasdaq platform. By doing so, we can lower the cost of capital. But it's not just limited to a green bond. We can also involve, for example, the EBRD, which is, by the way, one of our partners, further helping to de-risk an investment project in an emerging market such as Kazakhstan. Number 3 is asset protection. Why is that important? Well, after all, if you invest something like 100 million pounds, you want to make sure that your asset is protected. There's no 100% guarantee, but we created an international court under English common law, and we also have an international arbitration center. Just to cite a few names, the current Chief Justice is Lord Mance, and he, of course, has an impeccable reputation, but it further highlights the independence of this court, and all the judges are actually British judges. Number 3 is that over time, what we could do through a securitization vehicle, we could have an SME listing. And what this will provide, it will provide further access to further growth capital and allow the project to go from 1 to 2 to even multiple projects. And of course, keeping in mind the right capital structure, so we would have access to both equity on the Astana International Exchange, but also further access to Islamic bond or potentially also a green bond. And then finally, repatriation of profits. If you're going to have a foreign investor that comes to Kazakhstan, what always comes to mind is, am I allowed to repatriate my profits? And the answer is yes. It's not just about 100% ownership, but it's also about repatriation of profits. And with these 5 elements, and obviously it's not limited to these 5, we can largely de-risk projects in the eyes of the foreign direct investor, and at the same time stay true to our mission, both at the AIFC, but also at the global, the Green Finance Center. Asel, next slide is back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so we see our journey ahead as a appreciation of our strategic goals and concept that I mentioned before. So in terms of missions, to become a green finance hub in the region, to launch the flow of foreign investments to environmental projects, not only of Kazakhstan, but also from the region, through exchange and further development of regulatory framework and introduction of legislative standards. And introducing obviously new green and social financial instruments, for example, bonds and loans and etc., like insurance and ETS trading, etc. So building the capacity of experts in green finance by training and seminars, webinars, improving their competitiveness, particularly in the GGFI, and further support of developments in the green finance and fintech, and further improvement of favorable environment and increasing high quality human capital. So this is it, I think. Thank you so much for your attention.
Well, thank you so much, Asal and Alexander. That was an extremely cogent presentation of a journey that you've taken over a very short period of time, really less than 4 years. My congratulations to you. For those on the webinar, I might point out that the Global Green Finance Index is always open for your opinions on AIFC and other centers. And the objective really is to help everyone. Mike, next slide. The important thing about the Green Finance Index is a very simple one. We are trying to use measurement to help advance centers' thinking on green finance, to encourage them to become greener in themselves, but also to use the financial system to deliver sustainability, and at the same time to take advantage of both cooperation, collaboration, and competition. The program actually began in 2016. Next slide, Mike. And our first publication was in March 2018, and the 5th edition came out this past March 2020. So we too have followed Astana in the sense of being about 4 years old and progressing, we hope, very rapidly as well. It's a subject that I think many of us would agree the planet needs to move fast, and we seem to be picking up pace. Next slide, Mike. The point I'd like to make is that the index is slightly rich. It has 2 elements to it, depth and quality. Depth is really looking at the intensity of something. How much does a center actually walk the talk? Is it truly green, really throughout? And the second one, which is quality, is, okay, that's fine. What kind of advice do I get? Is it good quality advice, or is it earnest, but not very good? And these 2 aspects, I think, are very important, because you can be running a particularly great financial center and have high quality advice, but be somewhat hypocritical about your commitment. And equally, you can be running an extremely earnest center and not providing great advice to people. So measuring both factors is important. Next slide, Mike. Now, the measurement takes place on a number of dimensions. It consists of what individuals who work in financial services think, and we survey thousands every 6 months. But it also takes account of over 100 instrumental factors, many of which are listed here. I certainly won't go into this, but I, as you would expect, will point out that it's all on the website. Next slide, Mike. So what sort of conclusions can we draw? Well, I think the first thing is that there's a gap, and a gap that centers like AIFC might well fill. So you see here, for example, the tension between depth and quality, which is quite intense in New York, a little bit less in London, but very deep in areas like Dubai. So what we're seeing here is an opportunity for centers who are trying to develop their overall financial center to use green as one of their themes. perhaps alongside, as Alexander pointed out, arbitration, mediation, expert determination, or fintech, or maritime, or whatever focus that you would like. So smaller centers have a potential. Next slide, Mike. And with this potential, there's also another interesting gap, and that's in the product area. I might point out, much as we are quite pleased with the development of the Climate Bond Initiative, with which Long Finance has been involved since its instantiation over a decade ago. Nevertheless, in fact, it always seems to come back to green bonds, and there are many other product lines out there that could be pursued. You know, I might pick up the renewed interest, which we support fully in carbon markets and carbon trading. There's certainly the insurance sector, which with a lot of potential, renewable energy, as you'd expect, and an area also deep to our heart, which is the government bond area, policy performance bonds, which is an analog of the emerging ESG-linked bonds, which we've also written about for many years. So there's a lot of potential out there, and this slide demonstrates that much of this universe hasn't yet been explored. On the next slide, you'll see one of the problems in green, and this is, you know, what's on practitioners' minds. And basically, it's really only two things. One, they're very concerned about policy and policy stability. And secondly, they're concerned with genuine interest by the public and genuine interest in climate change. And those two things are what separate green finance from any other normal finance. And so the moves that AIFC have made to engage and deepen the rails of stability in their policies on green finance and the creation of a separate entity to push it are all very encouraging. The one thing investors don't want to see is a change in policy. And if there's a change in policy, it's done slowly, methodically, considerately, and in consultation. So this is an extremely good initiative that ASAL is leading. Next slide. So what might I say, really by way of conclusion? Well, the first thing is we do notice in the first 5 editions that green is to some degree a Western European affectation, very interesting and exciting to Western Europeans, less so to Americans, and somewhat internalized in the case of China. But I think as AIFC points out, it is spreading. I might point out that AIFC, in a lot of ways, to a number of Westerners, might seem people are just sort of getting onto the bandwagon. And I would say I disagree. Ireland only began Sustainable Nation Ireland 2 years ago. Guernsey decided to focus on green only 3. And as Alsan's been pointing out, Kazakhstan's been on this for 4 or 5 years. So don't underestimate it. Definitely don't underestimate the importance of a BRI nexus and a major zone of investment. So I think that you could easily underrate it by reckoning it's just not a place that's been on your well-traveled path so far. I think second thing is green cities do very well, and AIFC's focus on this is likely to boost many of the other accompanying initiatives that AIFC is doing. And I would hope that over time that there will be a premium, which you see in Amsterdam, for example, in banking, accruing to the AIFC for this very earnest and important work. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you also to Alexander and Azel. We've got a number of questions have been sent in and limited time. So I'm going to ask panelists in answering questions to keep things short and sharp. And I'll just take, first of all, a set of questions really on the detail of green finance. First of all, are concessional loans offered by Kazakhstan financial institutions? And I think one that's been answered is, will green bonds be subject to local law or English law? So first of all, concessional loans and the legal framework. Who would like to start on those?
Well, I can answer on green bonds. I think that yes, it will be directed under the AIFC jurisdiction, obviously. So because we have our own AX green bond rules, which are based on best practices and international principles and standards. Regarding the concessional loan, I think that as Alexander mentioned, our partners such as multi-development banks, they can help us with that. For example, EBRD is working also on concessional loans, so-called the green loans, even though it is not labeled as green loans, but they still provide some incentives for that. And they invested a lot of money since 2008 into renewable sector, especially.
Thank you very much. There's a question about which sectors have been supported by green bonds so far, and I think the position is that at the moment there hasn't been a green bond listed. That is still in the future.
You're right.
But there's a question about green bonds and whether they are placed for local investors. Do they assist the capital market in Nur-Sultan? Are they part of the local economy, I guess?
I would say that it is absolutely free market for everyone. So local participants local investors can get involved into that, and we're now working with Eurasian Development Bank, for example, which represent the CIS region and Eurasian Union. And like foreign investors, they're welcome to participate in our on AIX in buying the green bonds. And I think so it is not absolutely limited. So it is free for everyone to participate, and AIFC Green Finance Center is ready to help all potential issuers and investors. And answering your previous question, what particular green projects we can address. So we address actually many sectors, economic sectors such as renewables and energy efficiency and waste management and building ecosystem and preserving biodiversity. So we're ready to support all green projects that are in our taxonomy.
Thank you very much.
If I may add to it, and just looking at the potential, those of you who have been in Kazakhstan know the sheer size of the country. It's the 9th biggest country in the world, centrally located on the Eurasia region. And China and continental Europe, and I assume that would also include the United Kingdom, will always be importers of two things. That's energy and that's food. Now, we are strategically positioned in order to supply clean energy and food to both China and Western Europe. And this shows the potential for green financing within Kazakhstan through the AIFC.
Thank you very much. I think another one for you, Alexander, is a question: does the AIFC provide information on country profiles in Central Asia? In other words, providing investors with a legal framework and tax matters across the region. Is that a service that AIFC provide?
Well, currently not, but it's actually something that we are working on right now. We discussed it actually a couple of weeks ago during our executive steering committee, and it's definitely something we are working on, because it will dramatically shed light on these important aspects, especially for foreign investors. Yes, indeed. But currently not.
Thank you very much. I want to turn to sustainable agriculture. There's a question here about agriculture being a critical investment, and in particular the soils in many parts of the world, but also in the region in which you're situated, are being degraded. Is there any way you think that AIFC and the GSE could help structure a green bond to help with sustainable agriculture and soil degradation? And who would issue such a bond?
Well, maybe we can both address this ourselves. Let me, the first part maybe. And where we would, for example, well, if you go back in time, at the time of the former Soviet Union, Kazakhstan was the largest producer of wheat in the world. Now we're not even top 10 anymore in the world. There are various reasons for that, but obviously the potential is still there. Obviously, soil degradation, access to water are key areas of concern. Remember, my last slide at the very beginning was about applying the fourth industrial revolution and the fourth industrial revolution technologies, including to agriculture. We have looked at this, and this would allow to use less fertilization, and as a result, avoid the risk of toxification of the soil. We will also be able to use dramatically less water, and at the same time also increase yields. So, and if we can combine these three things, then we can not only dramatically scale it, but at the same time we can also do it in a much more sustainable way. And then the last part of the question I will let Asel address.
Thank you, Alexander, and thank you, Mike, for the question. So, in terms of issuing green bonds for this kind of project for sustainable agriculture, I think, well, particularly in Kazakhstan, so it can be, the issuer can be the national company responsible for agriculture. We do have such a company in Kazakhstan. It can be the state-owned enterprise, which is also somehow related to this project in terms of implementation of this project on one or another stage. And it can be the SMEs, the small medium enterprise, who own the land.
Thank you very much. We've got a question here on Islamic finance, in particular, that was mentioned in your slides, Alexander. There's a question about whether there's involvement of the Green Finance Center in developing green sukuk standards and guidelines, and how the question of Islamic finance and green Islamic finance resonates with the organization's overall mission. I don't know whether Alexander and Asel probably want to have a go at that one.
Well, interesting question, fascinating question even. So indeed, we have a green bond taxonomy, so we can issue that to the AIX. Similarly, we can do that also with regards to Islamic finance. Now, last year, and I think it was in December, we had a competition about articles that would help the AIFC develop. And one of them was actually maybe not a hybrid, but increasingly convergence of both green bonds and Islamic bonds. So as you referred to, or the person who asked the question, the green sukuk. Actually, that article also won the top prize in the competition and will be published by CISI in their review forthcoming in September. Is this something we're looking at? 100%. Because we see a lot of commonality between these two instruments in order to further drive the sustainable economic development of Kazakhstan. And with regards to Islamic bond, we actually did a cross-listing that of an Islamic bond that was initially listed on the London Stock Exchange, and that was recently earlier this year. But indeed, looking at kind of a hybrid format between the two is definitely in the cards.
Yes, I can only add that the common part of green and Islamic is definitely the ethics. So it's the ethical finance.
Okay, we're running short of time. We've got room for a couple more questions. First of all, in the post-COVID world, the question is how challenging will be the raising of debt finance for projects evolving through your centre, as there'll be an awful lot of challenge to the economy and the ecosystem.
Well, that's not an easy question to answer, but let me try to give it a shot. And actually, we developed scenarios, and with Michael during Astana Finance Days, we're going to have a panel on the socio-economic implications. Maybe not really looking at our ability to raise debt, for example. But if we go back until, let's say, the end of last year, and one of the reasons that we believe that COVID-19 is having such an important impact is that we didn't develop a resilient economy that was able to cope with this global pandemic. So the solution, in part, it's not the full solution, is actually to build resilient, climate resilient infrastructure in order to potentially weather a future shock to the global economy. And I would argue that what's coming, what's on the horizon, the global climate crisis is of a totally different scale than COVID-19, despite the fact how bad it is. Now, if we look at global markets, there's about $200 trillion of capital available. So I think if we can come up with the right kind of projects that build in climate or more resilience, then actually I think we should be able to finance those appropriately, including through green bond issuance. I know it's only a partly answer it. Unfortunately, it's not an easy question. That's for sure.
I think it's not an easy question for any of us at the moment to try and guess the future and how the economies will be impacted. We're nearly out of time, I'm afraid. So one more question. Just to ask about the link between the taxonomies that you're using and the EU taxonomy published not long ago, and how you see that kind of interaction between green finance in AIFC and green finance in Western Europe.
Thank you for the question. So we looked through the European Union taxonomy and through Chinese taxonomy, through Mongolian taxonomy, that also Chinese Tsinghua University helped them to prepare. And actually, well, all the sectors, like the major part of the taxonomy, are very similar. They're interconnected, and when we go deeply into the particular projects of the taxonomy, so we can see a slight difference, for example, in energy production. As you know, our countries, I mean the CIS, post-Soviet Union countries, they are very related on oil and gas and coal, so-called the kind of brown energy, like fossil fuels. And so we put in our taxonomy kind of a transition sector. So transition from coal to kind of clean coal to gas. And I know that EU taxonomy doesn't have this, or still negotiating over this to put the certain thresholds for this sector, for energy production. And this is the slight difference that we have in our taxonomy and between our taxonomy and EU taxonomy.
Thank you very much. There are a few more questions which we haven't had time for, and I will pass them on to you after the webinar, and perhaps ask you to get in touch with people directly to answer any unanswered questions. But that's been a fascinating webinar, and the question and answer session really showed how engaged people are with the subject of green finance and how interested they are in what's going on in Nur-Sultan and other parts of the world. So many thanks for that. It just remains me to say that you're always welcome to get involved in the work that we are doing on tracking the progress of financial centres, the Global Green Finance Index, the Global Financial Centres Index, and the Smart Centres Index. Do get in touch if you want to know more, or we can help you in understanding where we're going with those. And a reminder that the Global Green Finance Index and the 6th edition will be published this September 2020. And please do get involved. Take the GGFI survey, which will allow you to give your opinions on how financial centres are doing in developing green finance. Just remains for me to say thank you to everyone for participating and for engaging with the question of green finance in Nur-Sultan through the AIFC, but also particularly to thank our panelists, Professor Alexander van der Putte, Azor Nurkmetova, and Michael Manelli, for giving us such a rich sense of where we're going in green finance. As is the way with all virtual events these days, we can't give you a full audience round of applause. I can indeed, though, offer you my applause and my thanks.
Thank you.
And thank you very much indeed. And we will see all of you again at another time. And whether that's in the Astana Finance Days or in future times when we're able to come and visit and see you in person. So many thanks.
Thank you very much.
And farewell.
Thank you very much. Also to Mike, Michael, and the ZGen group in particular for hosting this, but also for the participants to asking us very insightful questions. You have kept us on our toes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You.
It was my pleasure to participate. Have a good day.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye then.